Excellent. So today we are joined by Fiona from Insurance With. It's an absolute honour to have you here. I'm very excited to hear what you've got to say, and just thank you very, very much for joining us this evening to talk
Oh,
about
thank you for having me.
talking all things travel insurance. So over to you, Fiona.
Okay. Well, thanks so much for having me and inviting me on, Natasha. So I thought what I would do is explain a little bit about myself and why I set up Insurance With, and um, and then just give you some points about travel insurance, how to look for travel insurance, and also some things to think about when you're looking for travel insurance and how you might be able to reduce some of those costs as well. My story, first of all, I was diagnosed with primary breast cancer in 2005. And it was as a result of that, and I couldn't get any travel insurance at all to cover a holiday that I wanted to go on. And I worked in insurance, I was a broker at Lloyd's of London, and I just couldn't understand how I was a completely uninsurable risk after a breast cancer diagnosis. I'd had all my chemotherapy. I was waiting to have my surgery and radiotherapy, but I was deemed uninsurable by the insurance companies. And I just thought, this isn't right, and I've got to look into see how we can change this. So that's sort of where Insurance With came from. And I met the underwriters TIFF group who underwrite, who I work for, and they asked me to join them to to set up a brand that would look at covering people with not just cancer but all medical conditions. And the way we do that is we take a different look at it, and we have our own in-house medical screening system, and that's what makes the difference on the prices that Insurance With offer. I think you'll probably have a lot of you will have gone through our medical screening system, and we ask an awful lot more questions than you would get on a comparison site, for example. And it's asking those more questions, understanding the risk that somebody poses for travel rather than looking at somebody's whole life risk. And that's what we do at Insurance With. So that's sort of a brief why I started Insurance With. Unfortunately, in 2020, I was diagnosed with secondary breast cancer. So I now live with cancer, and I am on immunotherapy for the rest of my life. And after that, it was really, I wanted to make sure that we were understanding people living with cancer on long-term treatments of cancer. And we've been doing a lot of work on that with Insurance With, and on our medical screening system as well. So so that's a little bit about me. But I wanted to then start to talk about travel insurance and some points that you should be aware of when you're looking for travel insurance. Again, as Natasha said, if you've got questions, we can cover all those off at the end. I won't talk for a long time, I promise. And I'll save a lot of time for your questions. So, when you're first diagnosed with cancer, as I found, you find trying to find travel insurance, all the people that you used to use before all of a sudden won't cover you, or their prices are astronomical. But I'm here to tell you that cover is available, and it doesn't have to, cost the earth really. But some points to be aware of initially when you're looking for cover is the first big no-no that I would recommend is never exclude your cancer from travel insurance, because it's not just your cancer that you're excluding, it's your cancer or the treatment of it, anything that can be attributed to the treatment of cancer. So, for example, myself, I take immunotherapy, and that means that I can be immunocompromised for a couple of weeks of the month. So, if I was to exclude my cancer, went on holiday and picked up an infection, treatment of that infection wouldn't be covered under the travel insurance. So it's just people sometimes exclude their cancer thinking I'm not suddenly going to get cancer when I'm on holiday. It's not going to suddenly flare up when I'm on holiday. And yes, you're right, it probably won't. But the biggest risk that you're probably going to get on holiday is infection and things like that. And something that would be attributed to the side effects of the treatment that you take for your cancer. So that would always be my warning. Don't exclude it. And if you do, be well aware of the risks that you're taking if you do exclude it. Um, the other thing I always recommend, I know I work for an insurance company, but if you've got cover with your bank, I would always suggest to check your bank policy first. You might well have cover for your cancer under that. Or if it's not automatically covered, you might be able to get them to add it and to pay an additional premium. That might be the most cost-effective way for you. Some banks will cover it, some banks won't. It's just a matter of calling your bank to see if they're one of the ones that will cover. If they do, just make sure that they get it in writing. You get it in writing from them that your cancer is covered. The other thing that I wanted to talk about was the EHIT card or the GHIT card. And a lot of people will travel in Europe just with their EHIT and GHIT cards. And that is not, it gives you cover for treatment that the resident of that country will have, but it is absolutely not a replacement for travel insurance. So if something should happen that you need help getting home. A lot of people that I speak to just say, well, it won't happen. I'll get the first EasyJet flight home. It'll be cheap. It'll be fine. You might not be fit enough to get on a flight. You might need, even, for example, if you've broken a bone, you might need a fit to fly letter from your treating doctor in the country you're traveling from. The airline might insist that you have a doctor or a nurse traveling with you, and all that is at your expense. So again, it's something a lot of people take the risk on, is just traveling in Europe with an EHIC or a GHIC card. But just be aware of what isn't covered under that, and don't assume that it would replace travel insurance, because it doesn't. And then the other thing that I would point out is this: ensure that all your traveling party is on the one travel insurance policy that's declared your medical condition. So, for example, if you take out a policy and you declare all your medical conditions, and that's fine, and should you have cancellation, should you need to cancel your holiday, as an example, you can make a claim under your policy. But if somebody else in your traveling party says, depending on their bank policy, and you need to cancel the holiday because of your medical condition, the chances are their bank policy is not going to cover that, because you haven't declared your medical condition to the bank. So that's something we always recommend, is that if the travel depends on you going, make sure all your traveling party are all on your policy as well, so you have that cancellation cover should you need it. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was looking for travel insurance after you've had a cancer diagnosis. So although I work for Insurance With, I'm not here to sell you an Insurance With policy, and I want to give you some tips and advice on how to look for travel insurance. So the first thing I would suggest is that you don't try every comparison site on the market. As I touched on at the beginning, we use a different medical screening system from everybody else, and all the comparison sites and the majority of the travel insurance providers in the UK all use the same medical screening system. And it's the medical screening system that actually determines the outcome of how much your additional premium is going to be for your medical condition on your travel insurance. So if everybody's using the same medical screening system, the outcome that you're going to get back isn't going to differ from provider to provider or comparison site to comparison site. You might get maybe 10, 20 pounds difference, but if somebody's quoting you £1,000 on one comparison site, they're not suddenly going to be quoting £300 on another comparison site, because the medical screening system is the same across all of those. So I would suggest you look at one comparison site to get a range to see how much they're looking at. And then the other piece of advice I would give is to look at the Money Helper website. and I'm not sure if I've shared that link with you, Natasha. I probably should have
Mm,
done that before the call, but I will share that link with you as well. So the
brilliant,
Money
thank you.
Helper is a government website, and they have a travel insurance directory on there, and it's got a list of all the specialist travel insurers that will cover people that have medical conditions, and they helpfully note all the different medical screening systems that the providers use. So my advice is pick providers that use different medical screening systems. So Insurance With is on there, and you'll see that our medical screening system is protective. Then you'll see other providers with, say, a screening system for various, and then some providers might say they've got an in-house screening system as well. So pick different providers. You should maybe pick about three or four just using different medical screening systems. And then you've also had a look at a comparison site. And once you've done that, that's going to give you a rough look at what the market is going to be quoting for yourself. Um, so the other thing is that things that you can do to help reduce the price or help you get a quote, really. The watchword is always be flexible. So think about the time that you're traveling and where you are in your treatment cycle. If you've maybe started a new medication, if you've recently had surgery, all of that is going to have a bearing on the cost of your travel insurance. The closer you are, say, to surgery, the more expensive that's going to be. So if you wait, you know, if you get a quote, say 12 weeks after you've had some surgery, you might get a price for that. But if you wait, say, 6 months after you've had surgery, that price will be slightly less, because, you know, the side effects have gone, wounds have healed better, and things like that. Again, if you've recently changed medication, that's another thing. You probably need to be about 4 weeks on a new medication to make sure that all side effects are managed and things like that. So always think about timings, and it might be a no for now, but if you come back in, say, 4 weeks, then you might be able to get a quote. Or again, you might see the premium go down the further away you get from, say, a change of treatment, start of treatment, or maybe even a new diagnosis. The other thing is think about where you're traveling to. So different parts of the world obviously are going to attract different premiums. So Europe is the cheapest place to travel to, but then Australia, New Zealand. That's not that much more expensive because we have a reciprocal arrangement in Europe. We have a reciprocal arrangement with Australia and New Zealand on the medical side. So again, that might not be as expensive as you would think. But then Asia is not as expensive as, say, America, and the most expensive place to travel to is Mexico because of just the cost of the medical treatment there. So again, be flexible about where you want to travel to, and sometimes if you are particularly sick, or it just depends on where you are in your diagnosis. Some travel insurers might say, actually, we can only cover you for mainland Europe, because what they want to ensure is, should anything happen, they can get you home as quickly as possible. So that's what they're thinking about. So sometimes you might only be able to get cover for mainland Europe. So that's also something to consider. But as I say, just be as flexible as you can with your destination. Sometimes it's not about the destination, it's just about getting away and being yourself again after, having a cancer diagnosis. I know that's how I feel sometimes. And the other thing to think about is, I know probably before you had a diagnosis, you always maybe had an annual policy for travel insurance, but sometimes if you're newly diagnosed or changing treatments and things like that, you might not be able to get an annual policy. So my advice is always look for a single trip policy first. And if you can get cover for single trip, then maybe ask the provider if they would consider you for an annual multi-trip policy as well and see if you can get a quote for that, because it can be quite, soul destroying if you keep looking for annual policies and you just keep getting declined. So my advice is always start looking for a single trip policy first, and take it from there. And that's really sort of I know I've talked really quickly, but I want to leave as much time as I can for questions for you. But that's really sort of my top tips on travel and travel insurance. The other thing I would do is, it's not sort of travel insurance related, just more travel related. Is, if you are asking for a sort of assistance at the airport and things like that, I would always recommend that you get a fit to fly letter from your treating team, because a lot of the time the airlines, if you have asked for help, might ask you for a fit to fly letter, and you don't want to be scrabbling around looking for that at the last minute. So always get that maybe good 2-3 weeks in advance of travel. You don't need it for travel insurance, but I always travel with one just in case. Sometimes if you go on holiday, you've maybe done a bit much and you think, actually, the thought of standing in that queue is too much, I'm going to ask for help on the way home at the airport. It's always handy if you've got that letter, because you won't, or you would struggle to get it at the last minute from your treating team, from my experience. So I'd always recommend that you travel with that. The other tip that I would give you is always look for where you're traveling to, look for the local clinics that you might go to should something happen. Is there a pharmacy in the area where you would be able to go if you needed to pick up any medication? The other thing I always do is travel with prophylactic antibiotics, just in case. And I would always recommend you to speak to your team about that to see if that's a possibility as well. If you are traveling with medication, particularly if you're on pain medication, I would always check that, particularly if it's opioid pain medication, that it is legal in the country that you're traveling to. If it's not legal, it doesn't mean you can't take it, but you would have to contact that country, and there's some forms that you would need to fill in. All that advice is on the Foreign Commonwealth Office website. I can also share that with you, Natasha. Sorry, I should have probably thought about this.
No, it's great. What we can do is we can do a follow-up post tomorrow, and we can put all of these links on. Can I just ask you, Fiona, talking about the fit to fly letter?
Yeah.
If you don't have a fit to fly letter, and you ask for assistance, and the airline could they refuse to? Sorry, would you mind putting yourself on mute, please? Could they refuse to?
I'm watching this holiday insurance thing.
Graham, please, can you just mute yourself?
Right.
Thank you.
Right.
Fiona, would you?
Well, I wasn't expecting you to send it.
Right, hang on.
Do you need me to talk?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
I just saw you did.
Yeah,
Right,
okay.
hang on. I'm just going to mute Graham. There we go. Graham's muted.
Okay, cool.
So what I'm saying was, so could they actually refuse to allow you on the flight?
They might well do, and unfortunately that wouldn't be covered under travel insurance because you didn't have the documents that the airline requested. So if you're refused to get on the flight, if you're refused boarding, they could do. So as I say, I always have it just in case. As I say, you never know how you might feel at the other end, or even the day that you're traveling. I mean, I've got Mets in my bones, so sometimes I do feel quite achy, but I never know, excuse me, from day to day how I'm going to wake up and feel that day. So it's just something I do as a matter of course. As I say, and it's, that's one of the pieces of advice I always give to people is just get one. It doesn't cost anything, and just get it in plenty of time, and your team will normally arrange it.
Absolutely. I mean, after I spoke with you, because I haven't had one before, and I think I told you the story about when I was coming back from America, and I was feeling a little bit tired, and I asked, shared my diagnosis letter, and they said, all right, okay, yes, we'll let you on, and so on, and they said, but do you have your fit to fly letter? I went, no,
Yeah.
please don't abandon me. Anyway, they did let me on.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
normal they can be, but you never know,
yeah,
you just don't
absolutely.
know.
Yeah. But then when I
You
phoned up, sorry, when I phoned up my team and for this next coming holiday, and they said, yeah, and they're going to do it straight away.
Yeah.
So
So it's fine.
yeah.
As I say, it's always worth having in your back pocket. You just never know.
Great. Right, Fiona, I've got a couple of questions here for you.
Okay,
So
cool.
I think this one's from Mel. She says, thanks, really useful. I'm using my Lloyd's bank insurance and was surprised that there was no additional premium. I went through some additional screening, so was quite surprised there was no further cost. Is this usual? She thinks it's
It might be for Lloyd's Bank. I can't remember offhand who the underwriters are for Lloyd's Bank, but they might have an agreement with
yeah.
Lloyd's Bank, the underwriters, that they will cover certain things. I mean, what I would say is just make sure that you've got it in writing, that you're fully covered. Ask to see a copy of the declaration that you've made so you can check that they've got that correct as well. And then that way that you can ensure that gives you comfort to know that you are fully covered. But yeah, that's why I always recommend talk to your bank first if you have a bank policy, because that's probably going to be the cheapest way to get
Brilliant.
cover.
Brilliant. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Okay, this is from Duncan. It says, question not on insurance, but travel related. Many people recovering from brain mets find themselves driving under Section 88 of the 1988 Road Traffic Act whilst they're waiting for the DVLA to issue their new licence. This no issue at home, but causes, do you know, this is something I hadn't thought about as well. Although this is no problem at home, issue at home, it causes huge problems renting a car abroad. Is there any other way around this apart from complaining to the DVLA? So that's under Section 88, that you can
Mhm.
drive in this country as long as your oncologist says it's okay, and as long as you've been on treatment for a certain amount of time and the DVLA are happy for you to,
Yeah.
and whether or not that can be transferred to abroad.
Again, I would always check with the country that you're traveling to. And again, probably the Foreign and Commonwealth Office would be the best place to go. You might be able to do something up front before you travel to the country you're traveling to if you know you're going to be hiring a car there. There might be forms to complete. You might have to get a letter from your team, something like that. I'm not an expert on this, unfortunately, but that would be my advice. Would be check out the country that you're traveling to in advance of travel and make sure to see if there is something that you can do. Other than that, I'm not sure. Other than complain to the DVLA to sort of get the finger out and get your license back to you.
Yeah.
No,
It's a tricky
that
one,
would be
isn't
my
it?
advice.
Yeah, I guess every country will have different rules, and
They probably will do, yeah.
I suppose it's in absence of actually, because when you're driving under Section 88 as well, you don't actually have your physical license there. So maybe that's
Mhm.
why some countries, they actually want to see your physical license maybe. But like you say,
Yeah,
maybe you could put pressure on the DVLA. Yeah. So,
yeah.
okay, thank you. So, Sumitra, Sumitra said, hi, Sumitra here, treasurer of EGFR Positive. We just took a holiday to Mexico and the premiums were high, as you said. We took cover with yourselves. I am in early stage of EGFR lung cancer and after surgery on remission for about 3 years now. Just wanted to understand whether your underwriters assess the lower risk of such cases and reflect that in the premium. So,
Well, yes, we do, because we would understand that, as I say, we do ask far more questions. So we would have understood where you were in your diagnosis, how long you've been on treatment, what treatment you're on, um, the treatment that a lot of you take. I know our underwriters are well aware of it. They're well aware of how effective it is, and things like that. And that is all taken into account when they work out the price. I think you'll probably find it was your destination that pushed that price up.
mm.
Mexico is very expensive to travel to.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Right. Okay. Paddock's iPhone. I don't go away until February to Euro Disney, then a cruise to the Canaries in October. Would it be a different type of policy for each?
No, but you would need to get a cruise extension when you go on your cruise. So you could, if you're able to, you could it might actually, if you're only going to go on those 2 holidays, you're probably better off just doing single trips. So you just get your single trip to Europe for your Euro Disney, and then depending on where you're traveling to on your cruise. So if it's a Mediterranean cruise, you just need to obviously cover the European countries that you're going to, and then get the cruise extension. If you're going, say, on a Caribbean cruise or something like that, you would then need to get cover for America, get the cruise extension, and so forth. So it is the same policy, but for the cruise, you would need to have a cruise extension.
Okay, thank you. Right, okay, a question. It says, this is from Duncan. He says, comment rather than question. Be careful about what part of the world a particular country is classed as. For example, Greenland is a province of Denmark, which is Europe, but is classed as worldwide from travel insurance perspective. Always check that the country you are traveling to is in which group.
Yeah, I mean that is good advice. Some providers will class it as worldwide. Some might say it's Europe. I think the majority say worldwide. I think one that catches a lot of people out can be Turkey. Some class that as Europe, some don't. So always check, depending on the provider that you're using, particularly in those type of countries, what area that's classed as.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we've got a question from Annie. It's more of a comment actually, and I apologize if I can't pronounce the type of antibiotics correctly. So so Annie asked for prophylactic, is that correct?
Prophylactic antibiotics.
Right.
So that's
Yeah,
So that's
antibiotics.
that's antibiotics just in case.
Yeah, but she was advised by the clinician not that they weren't appropriate, as they need to identify the bacteria first. And so whether or not that type of antibiotic would be appropriate for the type of infection, I'm guessing.
Okay, I mean, I travel. This is me personally, but I'm no doctor. But I always travel with a broad spectrum antibiotic. But then I also travel with one that's specific to skin infections because I'm prone to cellulitis because I've got lymphedema in my arm. So I travel with those two. So I know one of the things that might happen could be cellulitis, especially in the heat. But then I'll travel with a broad spectrum antibiotic as well. There are those around. So I do know what your treating team are saying, hence why I do travel with two. Some will give it to you, some don't. I mean, we're always told we shouldn't be taking antibiotics if we don't need them. And I get that. But sometimes it's just easier to have them if you're away, if you've got a temperature running. It's just easier if you've got them rather than trying to get them from a pharmacy and things like that.
Yeah, I know my mum always travels with, she's prone to chest infections, and her team have given her a set of antibiotics just as an emergency. So,
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Right, so Carol says, I had 3 days skiing insurance with Insurance Within Switzerland, then took out an annual policy as I travelled in Europe quite a bit. When I asked to add a month in St. Lucia and was diagnosed with brain mets, my policy was cancelled. I have since been stable and would like to reapply for travel insurance. Is this possible?
Yes, I think if you were recently diagnosed, that would be that they need to have a period of stability before they would consider cover, and also the length of travel as well. That's something that we are looking at to try and extend it because we do have a lot of people that want to go away for more than the 31 days that we normally would cover. That's sometimes the maximum. So we're looking about being able to extend that, but we can't at the moment. But if you've had your brain mets, if they've been diagnosed, think with brain mets, we would need a diagnosis of 3 months or longer, and also to be on your treatment 3 months or longer, and actually not on steroids. That's the one at the moment that if you're taking steroids for brain mets, we find that really difficult to cover at the moment. It's something that we're talking to people about, and we're talking to medical professionals about to see, is there a way that we can do that, or do we think are we overestimating where we feel that risk is? So that's something that we're looking at. But people with brain mets on steroids at the moment, that's what we it's a no at the moment for insurance with. There might be other providers out there that will offer that cover though, but they might be quite expensive.
Okay, thank you. What is terminal diagnosis definition for travel insurance?
Unfortunately, there is no definition for a terminal diagnosis, even in the NHS. It's not clear. It's really unhelpful. It's unhelpful where we're talking about travel insurance because, everybody's terminal, even people with no medical, it's, we're all going to die at some stage. And so we find the term terminal diagnosis unhelpful. What we would look at is treatment, even if you're not curable anymore. So I have incurable cancer, but my cancer is very treatable. So that's a question that we ask. Unfortunately, some providers still ask the question, have you had a terminal diagnosis? But a lot of people, even though they've got incurable cancer, won't have been told that because they will have said, I don't want to know my diagnosis. Thank you very much. So if you're one of those people, then you can say, well, no, I haven't been given a terminal diagnosis because I haven't asked.
Yeah.
And so, as I say, it's very unhelpful. And as I say, there's no definition, not even in the NHS.
Yeah, that's really helpful, actually. Thank you.
Can I ask, just because it's in this context, in your case, the underwriters, do they still make a distinction between terminal and incurable?
No, we would ask people if you're no longer treatable and if all treatment has stopped, then we would want that person to speak to our medical underwriters. It doesn't mean that you won't get cover, but there would be a more detailed question set for you, depending on how well you are. Some people might say, well, all your treatments stop working, but people can still do really well even after that. So it's about understanding that.
Yeah. Right, great. Okay, we've got another question here. So we're looking at relocating to France for a year. I'm ALK positive and would need to be returning to the UK every 3 months for scans. And one stipulation is proof of travel insurance. How feasible would it be to get travel insurance for this amount of time? So looking at relocating to France for a year, ALK positive would need to return back to the UK every 3 months for scans. Would they be able to get travel insurance for that length of time?
I think that would probably prove quite difficult. Because you're coming back and forward every 3 months. So with travel insurance, your trip has always got to start and end in the UK. You've got to be a UK resident as well. So it depends on what status you're going to be taking up when you go to France. If you are going to be sort of a resident of that country, or are you just going on an extended holiday? We have people that young kids can go off traveling for 12 months, but that's a 12-month holiday. It depends on what you're moving to France for. And because UK travel insurance, as I say, you've got to be registered with the UK GP, resident in this country, and your trip has got to begin and end in the UK. So if you can sort of cover off all of those, then your next step would be looking for somebody that might offer you 12 months cover. There are providers out there that will do that, but you might have to be under the age of 55. I don't know how old you are. Some say before we'll give a 12 or 18 month policy, This is for people that are maybe doing sabbaticals or backpacking for, 12 to 18 months. That's what these policies are designed for, really. But you generally have to be under the age of 55 to do that. But the other thing is, because you're coming back and forward to the UK every 3 months, you might be able to get a 3-month travel insurance policy. But again, depending on whether you're still resident in this country, you're registered with your UK doctor, and you fit into all the stipulations of that travel insurance provider.
Okay, thank you. I think we've already covered this next one. It says, can you confirm if a condition being controlled by TKIs, which is the type of medication that a lot of us are on, is classed as terminal for insurance, for an insurance questionnaire? I think we've covered that, haven't we?
Yeah, I mean, it's not terminal. It's incurable.
It's incurable.
But treatable.
Yeah. So we've got my bank's cover wouldn't cover my cancer, but would cover me for other incidents, e.g. being hit by a car crossing road. Is there a problem keeping the bank's cover and having specialist travel cover for the cancer issue?
No,
Thanks, Ian.
not at all. So for example, you might have some dual cover, so baggage cover and things like that. So if you've got dual cover and say you make a claim on your bank policy might say, have you got this covered anywhere else? And you say, well, actually, I've got a specialist policy with insurance with as well. Then they might well write to our underwriters and say, well, can you give us a contribution towards that? They've lost their case. So that's the only thing that would happen, but that's all done in the background. And that happens a lot with insurance companies. If there's two things covering one policy, if there's two companies covering one risk, they would ask for a contribution. But no, there's not a problem with you having a separate policy. It's not a top-up policy. In fact, I've had this question from Breast Cancer Now just recently, because they spoke to their bank and said, I'm going to be buying a top-up policy to cover my medical condition. And if it's a top-up policy, the main policy's got to cover you first before you get it, but it's not a top-up policy that you're getting. You're getting another separate policy that will cover your medical condition. So if you are talking to your bank about it, you just need to make it clear that it's not a top-up policy you're buying. It's a separate policy that does cover everything as well.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Smitra, again, another thing, a question on travel insurance. In Mexico, we were virtually being sent back as the immigration authorities didn't understand my resident status in the UK. In such cases, does the insurance cover all the costs which have incurred, including booking of hotels? Smitra, would you like to just come on a minute? And is that because...
Yeah. I mean, just to explain, they had said, and I got a confirmation from the embassy that if I am a permanent resident of the UK, I don't need a visa, However, our travel cards, and which is the first time I noticed that, our residence cards don't show clearly that I am a permanent resident. And also, as you may be aware, UK is going through a process of digitizing all residence visas. So everybody's visa expires on 31st of December this year, So they were taking it as that I'm not a permanent resident, and therefore my visa is expiring on 31st December. And even though I showed them the the embassy's letter saying you are perfectly okay to go, they refused to accept it, and they were not understanding the word settlement and all that, So, and I refused to budge, and after 6 hours, I finally got them to agree, and I was allowed in. But my question was that because they were trying to put us back in the next flight, in such cases, does a policy help us? I mean, it was a unique case, though, for us.
That is quite a unique case, actually. There is a general exclusion under all travel insurance policies that if you don't have the correct documents to enter a country, then your travel insurance is not
Hasn't
valid.
valid.
So if you haven't got the correct documents.
But I had the correct documents. It was not understanding it.
Yeah. So again, that would be a really grey area with all travel insurers, whether that would actually be covered. You know, again, they would be saying, well, actually, it is an exclusion under your policy if you refused entry to a country because of visa rules and things like that. And it depends on how that is worded in the policy wording. And, you know, and everybody will be different. So again, it's always make sure you've got the correct documents before you leave the country. But, you know, as I say, that's medication, everything like that, and visas, etc. Particularly if you're traveling in Europe this year, we'll all need a visa. I think it's coming in. They're not mentioning it very much at the moment, but there is supposed to be a visa system coming in. And there was talk that it was going to launch in August. But I've heard no more about it. But it will be coming in this year, where we'll all have to apply for a visa to go to Europe, very similar to what we have to do when we go to America, that ESTA that you have when you get into America.
Right, okay,
But
that's really
keep a
helpful.
watch fly out on that, because that will be coming in.
That's really, because they've kept that very, very quiet, because I'm sure a lot of us are heading off to Europe this summer, and I didn't know that it was imminent.
Yeah, the Foreign and one of my colleagues went to the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, had a day on it to talk to travel insurers and everything about it, and they were talking about it, and they came back. We said, nobody's mentioned it. I've not seen it in any press or anything. That this is happening, but it is happening, and it will happen this year. But we're just, well, I don't, probably the elections holding all that up now. But it will happen.
That's good food for thought, and yeah, thanks for the heads up on that one.
Yeah.
Okay, so Ken says, I have travelled a few times using Insurance With and have found the premiums to be very favourable. Recently, I couldn't get through to them and used another company on the list. Oh my goodness gracious me. So he didn't use you because he couldn't get through to you, but it cost him, listen to this, it was £3,000 for 5 days to Spain.
Oh my goodness.
Are some, and then he asks, are some companies just ripping people off? I got back in touch with Insurance With and it was £39.
Wow.
The difference.
They're not ripping you off. As I say, it's about the medical screening system and understanding the conditions. And what a lot of other medical screening systems do, they have they say they class everybody, say with secondary lung cancer, you're all exactly the same risk, whether you're taking an immunotherapy or not, you're all the same risk, and you're all going to pay the same price. And that's why you can have those massive premiums, because they're just not understanding the risk that individual poses. And that's what, as I say, we try to do with Protective, our medical screening system, is to try and understand that risk more and rate it to the person, rather than what, you know, the perception of somebody living with secondary lung cancer or lung cancer.
So it's more bespoke, isn't it?
Yeah. Apologies that you couldn't get through. Unfortunately, the phones are exceptionally busy. I would always say try and get a quote online first, because that will always cut down your telephone call. And even if you've got questions once you've done that, that's fine, but that will be a lot quicker call for you. And if everybody could try and get their quotes online and then do it that way, then that sort of cuts down the time online. We will very soon be launching a new quote journey, which will enable you to go back and check what you've done and make changes to the mistakes you've made. I'm hoping that will be going live by September this year. So that will save everybody an awful lot of time, and more people will be able to have the confidence to be able to do it online, because they can go back and check what they've done and make changes to the answers that they've done, which is not available at the moment, and that's why I know a lot of people call us.
And
so hopefully
you pretty much answered the next question, actually. It's like you could read their minds. So the next one says, is your website or a personal call to your office the best way of obtaining a quote? Well, I think you've just covered that.
Yeah, so we would always say, go onto the website first, get a quote, try and get a quote online. You might be referred to call us. We have just launched this week actually a callback service, so you can book your own callback at a time that suits you now on the website. So if we can't offer you a quote online, you'll be offered a callback service, and you can just book that in. I think they're giving you 2-hour time slots and dates, so that makes it a lot easier for people, that they can actually book a callback if they want, or they can still call up. Unfortunately, at this time of year, though, the phones are really, really busy. So yeah, I can only apologise. But hopefully with the changes that we're going to be making later on this year, it's going to free up an awful lot more people on our phones, because more people will be able to go through online because they can edit their quotes.
Good stuff. Okay, next question. I am planning on driving through Europe to Italy, Lake Como and back, going through 6 countries over 3 weeks. Would I get travel insurance? And do I have to declare all countries and dates, or just state Europe? I know this person who's asked the question, and I'm hoping he's okay for me to say this. He has got stage 4.
Yeah, no, so 3 weeks is 21 days. That should be okay. And yeah, you just note down the countries that you're traveling to. You can ask for just Europe, but the quote will ask you the countries that you're traveling to, so you just pop them in, and as you're driving through. But you should be able to get cover. You can try online.
Brilliant, thank you. Okie dokie. Somebody's just said thank you. They have to go. And yes, we are going to put the recording link onto the support group, the Facebook support group. So yes, we are. Okay, so the problem with most medical screening is that lung cancer is all lumped together, and most stage 4 lung cancer patients live less than 1 year. Obviously, ALK and EGFR are an exception to this. Oh, and that's right. That's just a comment. That's somebody commenting, and that's the reason why Insurance With is working with EGFR to actually get to know our disease, get more clarification about EGFR and
and we're working with other lung cancer charities as well, because we do know that there are differences in the different types of lung cancer, and the importance of asking the right questions for the right type of lung cancer.
Yeah. Okay. Hi, Fiona. How do we define ourselves having ALK when asked? Terminal sounds as if our days are numbered imminently, and I can hear premiums rising. Can we state ALK and elaborate, i.e. stable for 3 years first treatment? Would companies understand, particularly Insurance With? Many thanks.
As I say, Insurance With do understand, and that is, when we look at the risk rating of people with ALK, then we do understand that. I think if you try to explain it to somebody else, it's because it's about the medical screening system. So it's unless you can talk to the people that actually do their medical screening questions, which again wouldn't be the provider, they're not going to understand what you're saying, and they can only answer the questions that are in front of them, if that makes sense. Again, that's one of the reasons that we are working with you guys, so we can make sure we are asking the right questions and rating the risk correctly. As you say, you've been on treatments, really stable, living well for the last 3 years, and you're still on your first line treatment. So, that does reduce your risk. But it is something that we do. We feel we rate that accordingly, but we're also working with the charity to make sure we are getting that correct.
Thank you.
If we travel for more than 31 days, will we not be able to insure with Insurance With?
At the moment, our limit is 31 days for any one holiday. It is something, as I said earlier on, that we're looking to try to extend. There might be an age limit on it as well, but it is something that we're looking at trying to extend it for people, that maybe we can do 90 days, but that's not something that we can do at the moment, but it's something that we're looking at, and we're looking at how that would affect the risk profiles that we're looking at. Because at the moment we're working out everything on 31 days and what are the chances that something could go wrong in those 31 days. And again, the longer you're away, the more chance there is for something to go wrong. So the risk increases. So it's just about, understanding that and getting agreement from underwriters to change it. But it is something we're looking at, but not at the moment, unfortunately.
Yeah, and somebody's made a comment and they said it's pretty similar to what you've just said, is that so Duncan travelled for more than 30 days on an insurance with policy. He said just have a chat with the underwriter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So they might, so the individual ones, sometimes we can increase it, but it's got to go through our medical underwriting team.
Right, okie dokie. And Duncan again said, in my experience of using the insurance with online quote system, it starts by telling by telling them the treatment that you're on. Oh, that's in response to somebody else's question. And that's it. I think.
Oh wow.
I think
We've
we've
done
got.
well.
Oh, hang on. We've got one more. Oh, Ian's got a low battery, so he's got to go, and he says thank
Oh
you.
right.
Oh, thank you, Ian. So, hang on. Oh, we've got Chris says thank you so much. Thank goodness that you and companies like Insurance With exist. And
thank you.
I think I could absolutely echo that sentiment, because I know for many of us, me included, when I first of all looked at getting 2 weeks insurance for Spain, I was quoted over £2,000 just for me. And then I went with Insurance With, and it was a tenth of that. So thank you for not allowing us, but helping facilitate us to be able to go away and to live our lives the best we can.
And I think it's just so important. And I always feel that particularly the financial services industry have such an outdated view of what somebody with a stage 4 cancer looks like. And we live normal lives. I work full time. And so why can't I get travel insurance? And that's what we want to make sure that more people can do that. And we hope that other people, other travel insurance providers, look at what we're doing. It's the idea, I don't want to be the only provider that's doing this. I want everybody to be able to have a choice, because we want a choice. We don't want to, well, they're the only ones that are going to cover you, so you've got to go there. My dream is for you to have a choice, for everybody to do what we do, and everybody has a choice. That's my dream.
Oh, that's really kind. Hang on, we've got somebody else saying thank you. Little message, just saying, in fact, there's a couple of people. So Duncan says, thank you, Fiona. I've enjoyed a whole bunch of holidays thanks to Insurance With.
Oh, nice to hear.
And Ken says, yes, thank you so much. Your company has been amazing. Neil says, I travelled to Barcelona for 5 days and went through Insurance With online. The system was great. He asked, and they asked appropriate questions, and they quoted him £39. Thank you, Fiona. So that's fabulous. And Jill's having a problem hearing the Jill. You can access the recording because I have recorded it, so don't worry. Right, okay, so I think I'm going to stop the recording there. But first of all, before I stop, I want to say a massive, massive thank you very much, Fiona, for your time and for sharing all of your expertise with us. And it's just fantastic to hear that, even though we do have these diagnoses, that we can still go traveling and we can still, like I said before, just live our lives.
Yeah, that's it. That's all we want to do, isn't it?
Absolutely.